they're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?
I back. Trust me, I back.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing. Shut your fucking mouth, you'll do nothing. You'll do fucking nothing. Not one of you will do nothing.
I'll tell you what, bro. I was out there, I was fighting all the hitters, bro. You ain't fought no hitters.
Come on, guys. It's normal.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I would kill you.
John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John? I mean, really?
No, don't be scared, homie. I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the fuck he wants.
I'm gonna beat you into the living death. I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, people like that get slapped.
That's fucking illegal.
Nick Diaz, you just shook up the world. How's that feel?
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is a simulated death match. And you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
I said it last year. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
What is the game plan going in against him?
The game plan is you go in there, hit him with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question.
Any of you radio personalities think you want smoke? Call me Mr. Chimney. I want smoke.
Yes. What is up, MCR family? Another daily edition of the show. And actually, today you're going to get 2 editions of the show. Right now, MMA show. Later at 2 p.m. Pacific time with Rob. Going to be a boxing show. It's going to be a loaded day of content for you guys. So just stay tuned. Grab your popcorn. Grab a drink, whatever you need, and sit down and relax. But I'm joined, as usual, on these MCR MMA shows by the one and only. He had his day off today. Second day off in a week. I'm actually shocked that this is happening. Mr. Fugatti, the Chewbacca of MCR. Fu, how you doing, man?
Good. Just been listening to financial podcasts for UFC stuff for, hour and a half today. So.
Oh, yeah. It's fun, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, your mind's not fried at all.
No, put you to sleep.
Yes. I'm Matt, the Hipster Hunter. This is Fu. We're going to be talking all things MMA today. UFC Mexico, we're going to break down that card and also the outrage that is sweeping the MMA sphere and world about Yair Rodriguez's behavior and the crowd's behavior. Oh, my God, the outrage. Obviously breaking down upcoming cards, UFC Copenhagen, and obviously the Bellator smorgasbord that is this weekend, which I hate that they do this time and time again. It's 3 different televised cards, 2 events, but 3 different televised cards in one weekend for one promoter. Too much content. Plus breaking down the news of Brian Ortega versus Korean Zombie. Yes. Violence in that fight for sure. And obviously, like Fu sort of hinted at, we're going to break down John Nash's articles about the Zuffa finances. And since Fu wasn't on the antitrust hearing part of the shows, I think a week or so ago with Anthony Walker and myself, I want to get Fu's thoughts on the antitrust hearing overall, the information that's come out from that, the wage share, all the information that's come out from that, I think, groundbreaking, historic moment in combat sports history in that court hearing. But digressing from all of that, Fu, let's get into UFC Mexico. Let's just get let's get rid of the elephant in the room, the outrage about Rodriguez, his behavior, the fans and their behavior. I was on Unleashed, Anthony Walker's show, Anthony Walker from Sherdog MMA on Point. Check out his channel, Walkout Network. And we talked about it, and it seems like we were all in agreement, from us as media at least, that the outrage is ridiculous, that Rodriguez, while obviously acting, clownish and corny, and even the crowd acting abhorrent in a sense, clearly the outrage is extreme. that's my thought. I think that's thought of a lot of people that are saying, Fu, are you outraged about Rodriguez? And do you think that the UFC should not go to Mexico at least for 5 years, as some are calling for?
No, I mean, the MMA fans in general are kind of ridiculous in a lot of places. I mean, it's not, I don't think this is like a thing that only has happened in Mexico where someone threw drinks at a fighter or, come on. I think
I've been to shows where that's happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, was it fucked up? Yes, but it's bad anytime it happens. So it's not like this is a situation that's so much worse. I think, and I don't know, but in my mind, I was thinking Stevens has had like a lot of emotional problems. And I think that's where maybe fans are being overly reactive to like, oh, well, this is a guy that's already struggling. Isn't that kind of his thing? Like he's had some emotional stuff.
He's alluded to that in the past. I can see that. And plus, Stevens is one of those guys where he's a fan favorite. And he's been that way for a long time. You add in, obviously, the xenophobic and bigoted side of MMA fandom.
Yeah.
It's UFC Mexico. I mean, come on.
Yep.
The age of Colby Covington and people wearing MAGA hats. I mean, come on here. Do I really need to spell out and connect the dots here? That's pretty simple here. I think, and I mean, if we're talking about like really abhorrent behavior, the UFC event in New Jersey that happened not too long ago, someone was stabbed there, for God's sake. Okay, so like we need to really define what is truly unsettling, what is abhorrent behavior, and what should be banned or not. People were calling for the UFC to not promote Yair Rodriguez going forward. That's ridiculous.
A pretty successful and popular MMA fighter vandalized a bus and caused a ruckus at an entire event and kept a couple fighters from fighting on the card.
Another pretty famous fighter literally jumped and leaped off of the cage into the crowd and started fighting with the team. So if we're going to talk about like abhorrent, unsettling behavior, this isn't it. Like this isn't it clearly, in my opinion.
I don't get it because we're always going to be called the snowflakes because we care about female fighters' pay. We care that people aren't racist. Yeah. So we're the snowflakes.
Yes.
But the guys who are the most upset about this are the ones who are going to call us the snowflakes.
I mean, if we're being honest here, it's because those people are projecting a lot of the time when it comes to their viewpoints and world views.
For sure.
But look, I don't know really when this is going to blow over, but it is going to blow over. Because, number one, the UFC is not going to care about this. I don't think they are. There's a reason why they haven't come out and said anything to sort of back up this sort of circus show online when it comes to this outrage. Rob in the chat with the snowflake emoji. What up, Rob? And what up, Mechanical Priest in the chat as well. New listener, but seems like a dedicated listener. I think this outrage is going to blow over because, again, it's from a certain segment of the fan base that I think all the sane people in the room look at and laugh at, to be quite honest. Right?
Yep. And the thing for me is what Dana White's only comment was, Yair can't act like that. He's going to immediately rematch Stevens. It's like, okay.
Yep.
I mean,
that's fine.
Good. He raked his face. I mean,
it was bad.
I mean, I'm like, so
it wasn't even like he just put his hand out and pushed. It was he put his hand out and then started grabbing his face with his claws. It was hilarious.
So, and then I guess the other part that people were upset about, and we haven't really talked about this much, but the way that Bisping was treated. But it's like Bisping wasn't a respectable figure in the sport.
Bisping literally kneed a downed opponent and then spit on that opponent's corner.
Yeah. And so to me, it's like they don't owe you the interview at the end, anyways. I get as a promotional outfit, yes, they do because I think that's forced upon them.
Yeah,
but as a fighter, if you're just flopped in your home country and you're emotional, Like, give the guy a second.
Add in the fact that his entire family is there, his grandmother's there, who's battling cancer. I mean, I can sense the emotion. It's obvious that he's emotional. Does that excuse that his clownish behavior? Of course not. But it doesn't mean that the UFC should not promote him. It doesn't mean that he is now a bad guy. He was emotional after a fight. And guess what? That fight didn't even really happen. It was 15 seconds.
You can be Conor McGregor and be a part of rape cases, smash up buses.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. I mean, no, he's not allegedly a part of a rape case. He is like a part of a rape case.
Oh, that is
allegedly raped someone.
That's
right?
true. No, you are right about that.
So,
Good distinction there. Yes.
Yeah. And people are like, "Oh, he should fight Khabib next." Right? And like there's no outrage because he's an Irish white guy. That's the reason. And so it's like this guy shouldn't be promoted because
he yelled at Michael Bisping.
Yelled at Michael Bisping and had a bad performance.
And also continued to talk trash on Jeremy Stevens post the no contest.
Yeah.
Whoa, guys, a fighter talking trash on a potential future opponent again. Wow.
Pretty par for the course.
I mean,
honestly,
he should just go to jail, right? I mean, what is he? This is criminal what he's doing. But digress from all that stupid outrage that's been online. That's been just, again, crazy. This fight was 15 seconds long. Nothing happened. I think the rematch should happen. Fu, are you in agreement there? The rematch should be just next. It shouldn't even be talked about.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of the plan, right? They'll probably get thrown on one of these other cards as like a co-main or something. I don't think they'll make it a main event again, but...
Brief thoughts on the rest of the card. Carlos Esparza defeated Alexa Grasso via majority decision. This was a little bit of outrage as well. Some people were calling robbery. I didn't see it as such. I thought Esparza was clearly controlling most of the fight, and I do not see a 10-8 round in the third. I know there's an argument for it, but I just do not see it at all in my own personal opinion. I thought Esparza clearly was, again, controlling the fight, dominating on the ground, and at will was taking Grasso down. Grasso has continually not evolved her game. It's extremely frustrating. Brandon Moreno and Askarov went to a split draw. Who else? Some other notable fighters. Angela Hill defeating Irina Carmelosi via TKO. Dr. Stoppage, always going to support Angela Hill. Sergio Pettis versus Tyson Nam. That was a fun fight. Go check out that one. And Betch Carrera versus Sajara Eubanks. Oh, my God. If you haven't seen that yet, there's literally a clip where Sajara Eubanks lands a head kick, and then because Carrera's like concussed a little bit, she throws a punch and like pushes Eubanks down, and then hits herself in the face and like stumbles around. It's hilarious. Go watch this fight. It's bad MMA, but it is like funny bad MMA. So that's my thoughts on the rest of the card. Fu, any other thoughts on this card?
No, I haven't seen the other fights yet, so I need to go back and probably watch some of these. But I just kind of dug into the little controversy here and watched how blatant the eye rake was, since people seem to think it was. Some people thought it wasn't a big deal.
That was a blatant eye rake, but it's not. I mean, John Jones made a career out of it, guys. I mean, I'm not saying that these guys should be banned from the UFC. Moving on, next up, previewing upcoming weekend cards, UFC Copenhagen, Jack Hermansson versus Jared Cannonier. Both guys coming off big wins in the middleweight division. Hermansson picking up the submission win against Jack Ray Souza, and Jared Cannonier picking up the TKO win against Anderson Silva. The TKO win obviously due to technically a injury, but still significant wins for both guys, and now facing each other. Fu, thoughts on this competitive middleweight fight between two guys who are relatively unknown, but honestly, Hermansson's one of those guys where he could be knocking on the door of a Adesanya Whitaker winner really soon, or after this fight, honestly, and beat them, and it really shouldn't be shocking. He seems like a freak, a athletic freak, a skilled talent. So Fu, thoughts on this fight? Plus, Cannonier, a monster heavy hitter. I mean, the guy was a heavyweight. Now he's a middleweight, for God's sake. Guy's gigantic. Fu, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I will pick Hermansson in this fight. I think that as long as he can control, if he can fight his fight, he'll be fine. Cannonier really just has like the ability to end it at any point, right? So as long as there's no like freak accident or anything, I think Hermanson will win and go on to, like you said, take on potentially like an Adesanya.
And quickly, I was wrong. He didn't beat Jack Reyes via submission. He just had him in deep submission
Yeah.
threats at times. My apologies.
I think he just won like
via unanimous decision.
right?
Yeah, 5-round decision too. That's a good thing. I think Hermanson should win. I think he's the better overall fighter, but this fight is a standing affair for majority of the fight. Cannonier has the power, and especially the speed. That's the thing Cannonier has. He's not just a big lumbering guy with power. He is such a fast guy. Yeah. And I could see him easily catching Hermanson with a combination, hurting him, and that killer instinct is just unreal. And we also saw a little bit with Anderson Silva that he had sort of the discipline to pick his shots, look at the timing, sort of analyze what the distance and range was of the fight, and look for shots. And I think Cannonier is going to be one of those guys where he might surprise us in this fight and others. So it's just a really fun matchup. Other great fights on this card: Gunnar Nelson versus Gilbert Burns. Both guys are fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. That means that this is probably going to be a stand-up fight because neither guy is going to be able to take each other down and get the advantage. Or they get on the ground and we see some high-level displays of grappling. Ian Chutaleba versus Khalil Roundtree Jr. That fight is fantastic. Or it could be a bad fight as well. It's one of those where it could either be really fast, entertaining, and violent, or they get really tired after one round and the next two rounds are really slow and boring. Nicholas Dalby versus Alex Oliveira. I don't see how that fight's bad. I don't see how that fight's bad at all. Both guys are known for giving unheard of quantities of blood to the octagon gods, and on top of that, just delivering violence. OSP on the card. Always excited to see him. Sierra Barzada on the card. Always delivers violence. And a deep, deep cut on the card. Guys, you have to watch this fight. It's early in the night. I know, and that means for us here in the U.S., it's early in the day. So that means this fight's going to be at like 7 a.m. for us, 8 a.m. for us, Fu. But Lando Venata versus Mark DeCassi. I don't know how this fight's this low on the card. I mean, Mark DeCassi's a borderline top 15 lightweight, for God's sake. A lightweight. The deepest division in the sport. And Lando Venata almost beat Tony Ferguson in his first UFC fight on short notice. Lando Venata is one of those guys where he could beat anyone on any day. And plus, both guys are exciting fighters. I'm really enjoying this card from just on paper and looking at it and analyzing it. This is definitely one to watch on ESPN+. Fu, any other thoughts on the undercard of this UFC fight night?
No, I'm really excited to see OSP. And I think overall, this is, like you said, it's a pretty stacked card. It's like one of those, like we kind of talk about with boxing, where maybe it's not like a bunch of big names or whatever, it's not like a massive main event, but it's going to be a lot of good fights, like a lot of entertaining fights.
A good example would almost be like the Lubin and Robert Easter doubleheader on Showtime coming up. Great card, fun card, but there's no title fight on it. There's no real significant fight on it, but top to bottom, they look like it's going to be fun, competitive fights.
Yeah.
Sort of in that vein, this one is that for the UFC. Moving on to Bellator coming up this weekend. God, I hate when they do this. Bellator Dublin and Bellator 227 are technically the same event. They're on the same location, but they're split up. UFC Dublin, I believe, is going to be tape delay. Again, do not quote me on this. Bellator 227, air quote, which is Ben Henderson versus Miles Jury, a really good fight in my opinion. That will not be tape delay. Again, I do not know if I have that correct. I also do not care a little bit because we also have a third Bellator card this weekend on Saturday in LA at the Forum with Patricio Ferreira versus Juan Archuleta and Lyoto Machida versus Gegard Mousasi, AJ McKee, Georgie Karakarian, Darian Caldwell, Daniel Weichel, Antonio McKee, AJ Agrazam. A lot of significant fighters. Ava Knight, also a significant signee in women's MMA. A lot of good Bellator fights up and down. I would say, again, Ben Henderson, Miles Jury is probably the best fight, in my opinion, of all of them. I love that fight. But, Fu, any individual fighters you are curious to see coming up this weekend for Bellator? And again, a 30, 40 fight weekend for them, which is just way too much and clearly oversaturating the market. And again, tape delay in 2019 makes zero fucking sense.
Also, it's really hard on someone like me because it's hard for me to decide what to watch here and to pick up on it. Like, I'm not, I'm fairly casual in MMA, so it's like 3 events, 40 fights or something. It's like, dude, I can't keep up with all these guys. Obviously I know who like Pitbull is, so like, most likely catch that fight and Henderson. But Bellator makes it pretty hard on like an entry level like fan.
Yes, they do.
Like, it's overwhelming.
And I don't think they do a good job of like explaining who these people are and why you should care about them. They don't do that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They kind of expect you, if you're watching Bellator, you should know who these guys are. And that's an issue, in my opinion. Moving on, though, a fight that I think we can all agree is fantastic, and a fight that should all just, again, these are one of those fights that we should just pray to the MMA gods does not get taken away from us. Brian Ortega versus Korean Zombie in South Korea. Oh my God. This is so good. Like, I honestly, the UFC fuck-ups are numerous and consistent, but this is not one of them. This is a fantastic matchup. This is a fantastic location for the fight. I am just thoroughly entertained by this matchup and, again, the particulars of it. The fact that it's in South Korea. I love when Korean Zombie fights in South Korea. And again, anytime a fighter, especially if in the U.S. mindset, a foreign fighter fights in their home market, I always love that. To me, as a U.S. fan, I like that, actually. I like seeing Japanese fighters fight in Japan. I like seeing UK fighters fight in the UK. I like seeing Russian fighters fight in Russia. I do like seeing these things. Yaya Rodriguez fighting in Mexico. Like, those things are smart promoting. And this is just, again, a 10 out of 10 for the UFC in terms of matchmaking here. I'm not even going to give a prediction at this point because it's just too good. And Korean Zombie in his last fight looked really, really good coming off the loss to Yaya Rodriguez. Brian Ortega has a long layoff and a significant loss to Max Holloway to come back from. It's hard to predict this fight right now. I mean, wait and do more tape study on it. But Fu, thoughts on just the matchup itself, the location, everything. Your thoughts on Brian Ortega versus Korean Zombie.
Yeah, it's ballsy of Ortega. He had that loss to Holloway, and then he's going to go to South Korea and fight Korean Zombie. What a guy. I mean, that's
making LA proud. Making LA proud, Ortega.
Yeah, but I mean, no predictions yet. I guess we'll get closer to the event. It's a ways off, like 2 months off or so. But Volkan Ozdemir is going to be on there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, that'll be a good event. I like Ortega a lot. I think he's good for the sport. I think, people back to the outrage kind of culture. People were upset at him for some video that posted to him calling Stevens a puto or whatever. People just get upset about everything. It's like he just seemed like he was having fun at the fight, being silly, but seems like a good dude every time he's ever been in an interview, anytime he's ever been around. So I'm excited for this. This is gonna be a really good one, and it's not a pay-per-view. So,
and plus, if you haven't seen, and I'm guessing you haven't seen this film because you're a casual, right?
Yes.
I've been a Korean Zombie mark, a fanboy, a stan since he fought Leonard Garcia in their first fight in the WEC back in the day. Okay, not the UFC, the WEC, the blue cage. I missed that blue cage. People like Jose Aldo and Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz all got their start, was the WEC. But go check out that fight if you haven't yet. It's on probably Fight Pass, or probably at this point in time you can probably find it on YouTube or like Daily Motion. But go check out Korean Zombie versus Leonard Garcia 1 in the WEC. It is violence incarnate. It is no technique whatsoever, but it is violent. And another fight, I think it was either Dustin Poirier's first fight or Korean Zombie's first fight in the UFC. But they main evented a UFC Fight Night on like the Versus channel way back in the day, right? And Dustin Poirier and Korean Zombie fought, and it was a thing of beauty. And again, this is Dustin Poirier at like 20 years old. Korean Zombie's at like 24 years old. These are young guys just getting their start, and it is a slugfest. The scrambles, the submission attempts. Ah, God, Korean Zombie. And plus, he had the best MMA shirt of all time. If you don't know what that shirt is, look up the Korean Zombie t-shirt. It is the best graphic design in all of combat sports history. And plus, he walks out to cranberries, and that's like going to make me happy anytime because the cranberries are awesome. So, digressing from that, though, let's get to a serious topic here. One that lacks violence and is actually far more of a headache to talk about just because it's hard to comprehend sometimes. But the Zuffa finances, the antitrust hearing, all that stuff. First up, obviously, I've already talked about the UFC antitrust hearing as a whole and the wage share revenue and all that stuff, but Fu hasn't yet. So I want to get Fu's thoughts on these topics, on those specific topics first. And obviously, we compare it to boxing. We can do that as well. So some of our boxing listeners can feel like they're included in this discussion. But Fu, your thoughts on the antitrust hearing that went on 2 weeks ago? I think it was 2 weeks ago. Just your thoughts on it overall.
I mean, my overall thought is that it's impressive that they've pushed it to this point because I think this is going to be a hard sell. I think, these types of cases are really hard to win against like an event like UFC, like a
company,
Zuffa company, being such a fucking monster.
Mm-hmm. A multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in one of the articles it referenced kind of like when Golden Boy tried to, go up against Heyman for, kind of Heyman's like TV deals and keeping other promoters off and things. So these are hard to win. You have to have a lot of evidence. I think there's already kind of an idea that this is not even maybe going to make it past these proceedings. There was an article that just came out that the fighters that are a part of this class action lawsuit are already worried that this judge isn't going to push it through and that they just won't have enough evidence. So, but the larger points I think that we should take away from this is how screwed the fighters have been. I think they said the most pay that had the biggest share was something like over 40% or 56% in 2012 or something. Yeah, something in there. And then it's dropped every year since then, down to below 20% before Zuffa took over. And that Zuffa said like their operating cost, they were budgeting 20% of event earnings for fighters. So, I mean, that is, when you look at any other sport, I mean, they're saying there's no sport that's less than 50% in terms of like any sport that has a functioning union, like a, baseball.
And the crazy part is for like
right?
A great analog to MMA is boxing, which doesn't have a union. That has an average of like 70%.
Yep. Yeah, Top Rank pays out 71%. Golden Boy pays out almost like 60%. I think they said like PBC pays out like over 50%. I think it was the number. I'd have to look back exactly, but and then when you look at like, and we talked about this off the air a little bit, but and then with Rob we talked about how do these guys make money off of these massive events where these fighters, like you look at like a Manny Pacquiao Keith Thurman fight where the payouts were so high, and then you look at the events where it's maybe like a Jesse Vargas or like a main event like that, or an Omar Figueroa or something where they lose money, but they don't lose a ton of money. they make it up in these major events. Like that's kind of what it looks like the UFC is doing when you look at.
Let's look at this briefly,
Right?
and we're gonna try to compare it to boxing. Though I don't know if it's completely analogous, and we're gonna explain why I don't think it's completely analogous. But for the UFC, it's a really good indicator because, again, John Nash, bloody elbow. Go check the article itself. I'll post the link in the live chat for those that want to read it themselves. And again, there's a lot more in this article than what we are going to specifically look at. But UFC Live, Vera versus Jones. It was a sort of a fight night event, right? The event cost, excluding compensation, $1.1 million. Event revenue, $2.9 million, and fighter expenses less than $1 million. And you jump to like UFC 111, a pay-per-view, a bigger event. Event cost $6 million. Event revenue $28 million, and fighter expenses $3.7 million. And then if you look at Fight Night, let's say Florian Gomi, $1 million event cost, $3 million revenue, $700,000 in fighter expenses. UFC 200, $12.8 million event costs, $55.2 million event revenue, only $19.9 million fighter expenses. So these big events like UFC 200, UFC 211, these ones right here, they're making so much in the top end in terms of revenue that even if they not even lose money, let's say they not really make a lot of money in these smaller fight nights, they're making so much more in terms of real percentage, in terms of real ratio on these big pay-per-views that they're fine. And they're making tens and tens of millions of dollars. Now, to try to compare it to boxing here and to connect the two in some way, why I don't think it's a pure analogy for boxing in terms of how do boxing promoters make money. Is it just like this? Hey, these smaller shows, they either break even or lose money. And these big shows, they make so much more on the top end that it evens out or they end up making money in the year, right? A la Golden Boy with Canelo and their expenses that have been divulged to us through their PBC lawsuit. But the fighter expenses for boxing is so much more. We know that. I mean, it's 40% more on average. Near 50% more on average. If you're thinking of Lou DiBella's number we said in terms of boxing promoters on a whole, it's a 70% wage share. UFC fighters is 20%. So imagine if, again, UFC fighter, if UFC events, if they were spending or sharing 70% of the revenue for fighters, would they be making this much money? No. Would they still be making money? Absolutely, though. I think that's where we have to draw the line, that they're still making money with, Golden Boy, Top Rank, PBC, with these major events, even though the payout and wage share is so much more in boxing comparative to MMA. Because they're still making money. They're still making so much money at the end of the day that they might not make 20 or 30 million like the UFC is making. They might be making 3 million, 5 million. But that's PBC taking it in the cut. That's them that they can keep. Top Rank, they keep that. And you do that 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, 10 times a year, you're making money back. And again, these smaller shows, if you cut costs enough, especially with these event costs, because I'll be honest, for boxing events, the event cost is significantly lower compared to UFC events. We're talking about that a little bit, Fu. I forget how and what context before the show about the UFC's excuse was that, they're not like boxing because their production is XYZ. I do understand where they're going with. It's not true in what they're trying to do, but they offer so much more in terms of media accommodations. That's a cost. Overall, just the amount of people they have on the ground, the amount of camera crews they have on the ground, that's all of them covering it. Meanwhile, for boxing promoters, they usually offset that for the networks. The networks cover all the camera crews. It's not the promoters paying them. There's no media accommodations for boxing events. Come on. They don't pay for parking in boxing media events. In UFC, they do. I think that is where you do have this specific example with the UFC that they are making so much more money on the top end because they're not paying fighters enough, but they're also paying a lot more in the event costs because they're just a multi-billion-dollar company, so they can do that. They can afford it, unlike these boxing promoters. But long-winded rant short. I don't know how this gets remedied because while Fu, I don't really agree with your premise that this case in particular is looking dire. I think a lot of the reporting right out of the hearing was positive. It wasn't negative in terms of how the judge and sort of reading into how it went. But like you said, class action lawsuits, that's a tough one to win at times.
I think yesterday there was an article in Forbes where the writer was talking about how the fighters had written to the judge because apparently the judge has put a summary judgment out, and a lot of the plaintiffs are opposing the summary judgment because
I didn't see that.
Like he's going to just let the case go. But yeah, I'll send this to you. Sorry, that was in Forbes. It's by Paul Gift. I don't know how.
No, it's Paul Gift. Show money.
Okay,
that's the same people we're talking about.
Okay,
that's Paul Gift, John Nash, Jason Cruz. Shout out to Jason Cruz.
So yeah, he's saying it looks like there's a good chance that this judge is not gonna push this through like it needs to be, but it's a start always, right? So
true.
More people will get on, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to go somewhere. I was just reading through this, and it looked like he was just trying to say how hard this really is to win, and that the like a company like Zuffa and in the UFC, like I think they've only given information up to 2016 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I don't think they have any of the newer events. And then we know from like what Top Rank's done and what the UFC's done with ESPN's deal and only selling their pay-per-views on ESPN, and they probably get much better points on their pay-per-views than they used to.
Well, we know from Jason Cruz and MMA Payout that their quarter revenue, I think the second quarter revenue this year was $700 million. When comparative to just year revenue in 2015 or 14, it was 400 something million. They're making a lot more money with these pay-per-view events than they used to because of this ESPN deal. And I don't think we really know exactly how much these fighters are getting ripped off because this new deal, the UFC is making so much more money per event than they used to. These events that used to be duds, while they are buy rate specific duds now, the ESPN blank check they're giving them per event is changing all that. So $700 million in one quarter in terms of revenue. It's crazy.
And a budgeted 20%. That's what the article says.
Mm-hmm.
That when Zuffa took over, they budgeted to keep pay at 20% for the fighters. That's ridiculous. That UFC 111 was a fight between George St. Pierre and who was on that card? And Hardy? No.
Greg Hardy?
No, UFC 111. It was Henderson. Was it Henderson? What was the fight? Because it was definitely George St. Pierre. So in my mind,
was it George St. Pierre and Dan Hardy?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's like, imagine a boxing event where the payout for the event would earn almost $30 million, and the payout for the fighters would be like $3 million. If it was a fighter on the level of George St. Pierre, like imagine that, like Manny Pacquiao would do an event that was $30 million that the promoter brought in, and he would take $3 million from it. It would never fucking happen.
No.
Like
it's insane. And quickly, the Forbes article is in the live chat for anyone that wants to read it from Paul Gift. UFC lawsuit plaintiffs oppose summary judgment, make final pitch for trial. I'm going to read just these brief sort of part from Paul Gift himself. In other words, I'm not going to read the exact part from the fighters themselves and what their sort of summary, not summary, is their, what's the right word? The final pitch for trial. In other words, we're finally getting to the meat and potatoes of this case. Did the UFC maintain and enhance its economic power and put rival MMA promoters at a significant competitive disadvantage through its use of long-term exclusive fighter contracts? The other much weaker claims that the UFC prevented competing MMA promoters from accessing critical sponsors, television networks, and venue space, which I've affectionately referenced as the Colors Newton, finally appeared to have met their demise. Plaintiffs' focus throughout Friday's filing is the claim that UFC deprived competitors of a critical mass of marquee fighters, rendering them minor leagues. If Judge Bulwer determines there is no genuine issues of material fact, then the UFC could walk away with an early win, just as manager Al Heyman did last year in boxing's big antitrust case. Yes, it does seem like it's all of a sudden not going that well for them. That's sad. Because after the hearing, it was quite positive. And it seems like it didn't end up the way that they were thinking, unfortunately. Sad times. But, Fu, we're going to head out of here because we have another show to do. And I got prepared for that. So, yep. Fu, any last thoughts? UFC Mexico, UFC Copenhagen, Bellator, antitrust lawsuit, all that fun stuff.
No, I just think if the antitrust lawsuit and the class action stuff doesn't go anywhere, then, there's got to be some type of a union movement in UFC. There's got to be a fighter union. And it doesn't have to just be specifically for UFC. I mean, I believe legally, even Bellator fighters could unionize with UFC fighters. They could have like a mixed martial arts union. I would imagine there's some...
They've tried that.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's got to be some kind of a move here if they can't get any legal action here, especially with these numbers. If there's a case to be made, it's with these numbers. And then there's another part in here about Melendez when he tried to leave the UFC and how they kind of pulled some funny stuff with his contract to keep him from being able to go to Bellator. So that seems to me like the definition of, making another outfit not competitive when they had an opportunity to get a fighter. So
especially an independent contractor.
Yeah. So there's a lot there that I think, is good and people should be able to build upon. But outside of that, I mean, UFC Mexico, the main event was a flop, and I think we've got some good fights coming up. It should be a good end of the year for all combat sports. It seems like we've got a lot on the docket, and Showtime has more money now that Wilder's fighting on Fox. So get some more Showtime fights.
Fu, you have to be on the show later. You have to, man. You have to figure it out. I just want to hear you and Rob just rant about Showtime. Anyways, guys, find me, Matt Hunter, MCR all platforms. Find Fu Fugatti, MCR all platforms. And hit the like button, share the show, subscribe, patreon.com/Mixed Combat Radio. Be back in a few hours with our boxing show of the day. Peace.